All right. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Digital Marketing Agency Builders podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Narducci, and I have with me Steve Kahan. Steve is a Wall Street Journal best-selling author and has successfully helped to grow 7 startup companies from early stage development to going public or being sold, resulting in a total value of more than $5 billion. Billion with a B, guys. So big deal. Bringing passion and positive energy, Steve inspires teams and organizations to take on the impossible and succeed. He is best known for his ability to plan marketing strategies and execute them so that companies can accelerate revenue, grow market share, and consistently deliver superior returns for shareholders. Steve currently provides marketing advisory services to startup businesses, including several Insight Partners portfolio companies. In his previous position as Thycotic's CMO and Chief of Staff, he helped guide the company through incredible growth and a successful $1.4 billion exit. Steve, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. I have tons of questions for you.
Great. Well, thank you for having me, Tyler.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we'll just dive right in. You have a ton of experience, so I kind of want to jump into that first. I understand you started your career at a Fortune 500 organization. How did you decide to make the leap from an organization like that into the startup world?
Yeah. So for me, I found that the traditional path from school to climbing the corporate ladder could not only be high risk for my career, in many ways it felt like a death trap. And I recall so many times when I was growing up, my father would say, Steve, get your degree, go to work for a large corporation, you work hard, they'll take care of you, and you'll have a great career. And so that was the advice I took. And I remember getting a job after I had graduated college, staring at this pile of claims that I was supposed to process that day. I had $50 in my bank account, and the student loans would eat my paychecks before they ever had a chance to hit my account. And I remember thinking to myself, how on earth will I ever get ahead? And I asked myself an important question, which was, how could I earn a great living doing what I love to do? And I made the leap to the startup world and have never looked back.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can kind of resonate with that same background story. It's kind of like the myth or the legend of what we're all supposed to do with our lives, and how that's trickled down through generations, passing it on to their kids and their kids and their kids. Mine it was similar, but it was like, you have to go to college, and if you don't go to college, you're just never going to make anything of yourself. It's a non-negotiable. And I remember growing up thinking that it was either I was going to work at McDonald's or I was going to go to college and be this big success. And that was the clear A/B choice that you had growing up. And I feel like a lot of parents have instilled that, going on and on. But I feel like as we get,
100%. And even for me, when I started working for a large corporation, I found that, and that environment could be great for some, but I found it to be burdened by incumbent mindsets. The barriers to advancement were higher. You were typically pigeonholed in a smaller role. And these large corporations, at least to me, felt like bigger bureaucratic ships that were hard to maneuver, slower to change course. The bureaucracy was large, and the acceptance of the status quo seemed to be the prevailing opinion. And for those of your listeners that have an entrepreneurial bent, certainly startups are very different, and where you'll find more innovation. They're more faster, nimbler, more apt to change, and they just dart around those large battleships like speedboats, and they could be really cool environment to be in.
I completely agree. My first few jobs before I, ran my own business, they were all in small or mid-sized startups, and the environment and that, the fast pace and the flexibility I think that they have to direct their ship, where, the big organizations don't, is, in many ways beneficial for both the top and the bottom of the chain there. You recently had the opportunity to achieve a $1.4 billion exit at a cybersecurity company. Can you tell our listeners what it was like when you joined the company on day one and contrast that to when the company sold 5 years later?
Yeah, so it's sort of the inside story of a company with a funny name called Thycotic. And it was
Yeah.
cybersecurity. And just for context, what they did was they secured what's known as privileged passwords. And these are the passwords that exist throughout operating systems, databases, applications, so a company's infrastructure. And if the bad people get a hold of those passwords, they could do a lot of harm. And so when I joined, the company was the number 5 player in that space, had a cool product, but the competitors were much bigger. They were better funded. I had a staff and a budget a fraction of the size of our bigger competitors. Before I joined, revenue had flatlined 2 quarters in a row. And so sales was kind of a mess. There was no concept of territories, no partners. Sales outside of the States were done by one part-time rep in Washington, D.C. And marketing consisted of going to 52 trade shows. So it was very much kind of old school marketing approach. And we put in a new digital marketing strategy. I worked in conjunction with a few incredible agencies. We restored revenue growth in a quarter, hit our numbers every quarter for 5 years, ultimately grew revenue from 5 million to 145 million when we then sold the company for $1.4 billion.
Wow. Was the major shift in the marketing for that company just bringing them online? Like, as you said, they were doing trade shows. So were they doing anything online when you came in, or was that all,
Yeah,
built
not
up under
really.
you?
I mean, there was certainly a website, but a great indication, and this is not unlike a lot of companies that I speak with, is that if you ask them, as I did, who is your ideal target buyer? What I find with a lot of organizations that I work with, I get too broad or too vague an answer. And I recall talking with the founders of the company when I joined, and I asked them who their ideal target buyer was. And they said, Steve, you're supposed to be some hotshot marketing guy. You have to know that we are targeting the VPs of IT security, chief information security officers. And I shook my head and said, yep, got it. And then I started doing something that a lot of organizations don't do enough of, and that's actually talk to customers. And what I found, and you've got to ask the right questions as well. And what I found was that the ideal target buyer wasn't the VP of IT security at all. And this is a company that was 5 million. It was actually the IT admins. It was the techies in the trenches who were administering systems. Downtime was unacceptable. Security was a big cause of that downtime. They wanted fast, easy, affordable. They were never going to read an analyst report if their life depended on it. They might look at reviews from their peers. And where they hung out online was extremely different from those folks running IT security. And so once I found out that that was our target buyer, I immediately then focused our digital efforts on that buyer after I understood the full context of their world. And that's really what started the first aha moment in changing the game, which was focusing on the right buyer with the right message and then ultimately the right content.
And what was the right medium? Was that targeted advertising? Was that, content generation? Was that SEO, or was it a combination?
Yeah, so in the case of our buyer, this IT admin, they were like a lot of people. So they're going to Google, right? And so when they're looking for solutions, so you've got to be great on Google, which we were not. And we put a concerted effort on that, both from a search engine optimization perspective as well as pay-per-click. But then also we had a market where they were online. And let me give you an example of that. So a lot of the IT admins, they get trained from an organization called Cybrary. and they have tens of thousands of IT admins go to their site and get trained. And so we wanted to do a podcast. And the last thing I wanted to do was to launch a podcast that like nobody's going to listen to. And so we pitched the idea to Cybrary and said, gee, we've got some great cybersecurity talent. Why don't we partner together and put together a podcast to focus on cybersecurity? And they agreed, and literally overnight, because we partnered with the right organization and we were where our buyers hung out, we had one of the largest listened to cybersecurity podcasts around the globe. And that's just one example of many when you really understand the full context of the buyer's world and where they're hanging out online that enable you to be really successful without spending an arm and a leg.
I love that. I love thinking outside of the box, outside of just the basic, let's run targeted ads and spend a ton of money on it. And strategic partnerships is always one of those. And you can never just replicate strategic partnerships across different industries and everything because they're, like the name sounds, very strategic and thinking, where are these exact people that are, our target hanging out? What services are they using? And then utilizing them for their audience, already, which they won because you brought great content to a show for their listeners, and you won because you got a lot of customers from their listeners as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just one example. I mean, another example, because we were targeting more of a techie audience, was that they're constantly asking questions in Reddit, right? And so none of our competitors were monitoring Reddit, even though there was lots of conversations in and around what we did. And so what we had, we sort of had a rotation where our techies would be on Reddit. They would never respond in a salesy way because that's sort of anti-Reddit. And just because we monitored, again, where these techie buyers were hanging out online, we had good conversations with them in the way in which they want to be communicated with. That enabled us, again, to sort of think outside of the box, target our ideal buyer in the right way, and generate a ton of revenue.
Another out of the box, strategy. I love hearing these. These are really, really cool. And definitely probably one of the reasons why you were able to grow so fast is because you weren't just doing the same things everyone else was doing. I love that. What were some of the major lessons learned in the company's growth, and what can a digital marketing agency owner take from that as they try and scale their own business?
Well, I think that a couple of things. So first, as you noticed, I focused on their ideal target buyer. And a lot of agencies don't ask actually to speak to the organization's customers when they're going to go help put together a lot of the marketing that they ultimately do. And that's a big mistake, right? And so obviously you've got to work with a willing partner that will give you the green light to go do that. But what you'll learn is illuminating. For example, a lot of organizations, not only do they not speak with their clients' customers, but even if they did, they wouldn't be asking them the right questions. So an example of a category of questions which often isn't asked is about the status quo. And the status quo really matters because you oftentimes don't lose business to a competitor, you lose business to the status quo when you hear things like, gee, we're not interested, what we've got is good enough. So if you're asking questions that focus not only on their challenges, what their ideal solutions might look like, the benefits they're looking to maintain, but also questions about the status quo or questions about the impacts of the benefits that you hear articulated, which help you to prioritize, because not all benefits are created equal. And so partly what I found in working with agencies is let them, give them, and if you're running an agency, look for an opportunity to speak to the organization's customers. You'll learn a ton. And then on the basis of that learning, it really comes down to creating great content. So if you're, for example, putting together digital marketing strategies and the results are not where you would like them to be for your clients, oftentimes it's not because you have a poorly constructed pay-per-click program per se, but maybe the calls to action associated with that pay-per-click are weak, right? And just don't inspire someone to actually click on it and then ultimately do what most people hate doing, and that's giving their name, address, email, etc., right, online. And so to get that information, you've got to really capture someone's imagination. And a good example of that is looking at content differently. So here's an example. One of the pieces of content that we put together was called the Privileged Password Risk Assessment. And what this was someone would come to our site, they would answer a series of questions. It would take about 7 or 8 minutes. And then they would get immediate feedback. They'd get a grade like they're in university, A through F. And then they'd get this beautiful report immediately that would show them where they're doing well, where they're not doing well, and what they would need to do to improve. And that was like super compelling. It flew off the shelves. But then we took it to the next level. So because we collected information about the geography and the industry, as well as the size of company, we were able to send an email the very next day with a report that showed that prospect how their results compared to their industry peers. And people love that stuff. They always love to see how do I compare? Am I doing well? Am I not doing well? And all of that information not only created a ton of leads and served as the backbone for a lot of our digital programs, it also enabled us to get a ton of visibility. We could create annual reports on the state of privileged access management, or slice and dice the data and do a report on the state of privileged access management for medium-sized banks in the UK, for example. And that would feed our webinars, our podcasts, and other social information. So not only did we view our content as something that would generate a ton of leads, but also it would generate a ton of visibility, right? And so we took a different view to content, and it's in large part why our programs worked well. And so my advice to those that own an agency, when you're talking to customers, really try to help figure out what content would inspire them to offer up their contact information, because a lot of times you might find that the company that you're working for has no idea what that actually ought to be. And then if they don't know and you're unable to find out, do this. Ask with the company that you're working for to get a meeting, for example, with some of their best and brightest around the company. It could be people from R&D. It could be from professional services. It's not just from the marketing department. And send them in advance of a meeting an example of some great calls to action, some great content. It could be inside their industry or outside, just to get them thinking. And at the meeting that you call, ask each of those people to come with one great idea for content that they feel that their customers would just love to get. And when you capture that, then you could prioritize it as a team. A lot of time that content requires helpers to get it done. Now you've got your built-in team of helpers, right? Because they want to see their ideas come to fruition, right? And so those are some ideas that if you own an agency that might be a little bit out of the box, maybe something that you haven't done before, that actually might help you to produce better results and then build your business quicker along that process.
I love that. And this whole episode so far has been like very out of the box thinking, which is really, really cool. And I think that's awesome. Just thinking along those lines of content that's going to resonate with your audience and everything. agencies are always looking for new ways to get their own leads, like more clients for themselves, not just clients for their clients, but also more to grow their own client base. And I'm thinking like, if you're targeting roofers or if you're targeting, e-commerce stores or whatever, having, a site or a series of landing pages where you ask, how does your roofing company stack up to your competitors in your area? How does your e-commerce store stack up to, the median e-commerce store in 2023 kind of thing? And then just having, that sounds amazing. You'd have people constantly flooding into that, trying to see how they compare,
Yeah,
and if they're
yeah,
worse,
and like
linking
I
them over
think
to talk to you. I love it.
yeah, and the biggest thing that I see of the agencies that I've worked with, because safe to say I've had a ton knock on my door over the years, is that a lot of them sound exactly the same, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so that's a problem, right? And so just what you would advise your own clients to do, a lot of agencies don't do themselves. So what I mean by that is that they're not able to communicate the value of their own differentiation, right? So let me give you a couple of examples. In one case, there was a digital marketing agency that I've worked with for many years who's great, right? But part of their expertise is not just the traditional digital marketing programs, but it's it's the analytics, and it's also the understanding of the surrounding technologies like Tableau or Salesforce.com. So they're experts in the technologies that I was using, and they're just meticulous when it comes to the analytics. They're all about the numbers. That really differentiated them. Another example is a PR firm that I actually provided some advice to not long ago that is actually taking a position of being sort of the anti-PR firm, right? And basically saying that, look, traditional PR approaches are horrible. They suck, right? And you really can't tell whether or not you're getting anything from your investment. And then they have kludgy ways of helping you even figure that out, right? And so they're taking a completely different approach to solving sort of the PR problem and visibility challenge. And it's really resonating. But again, in both cases, both organizations were able to articulate their unique value very succinctly, not only in person in their presentations, but also on their website. And it really helped for me to originally say, yep, let's meet. And then ultimately we built a lifetime relationship, so much so that I refer those agencies over and over again for years.
I love that. You really do have to stand out, in the crowd. Your clients have to stand out and you have to stand out because competition is only growing as the years go by. So that's really, really good advice. You were able to restore revenue growth during your first quarter with the company, as well as go through what you called a hyper growth period for 5 years. Can you share with our listeners some of the key things that you did in order to achieve that?
Yeah, well, so we created great content up and down the buyer's journey. So we really understood our customers. I knew the full context of the world. I had sort of my own customer advisory board that I would run ideas from. We created great content, but here was really the key to that content. That if you look at a buyer's journey, right, just at the top of the funnel, they're doing education, they're discovering information. Then the next phase, perhaps they're considering various solutions. Then the next phase, they're perhaps evaluating one or two and then making a purchase decision. What I found is that a gap in content across any one of the buyer journey phases zaps the velocity out of a high velocity digital marketing model like you just can't believe. And so that content has to exist where the buyers are, not necessarily where your content may want them to be. So for example, perhaps some organizations, they rely on a product trial as like their primary piece of content or a demo, but a lot of their buyers might not be ready for that, right? And so you've got to be where the buyer is, talk with them on their level, and then have content that connects to each piece such that you're able to move those buyers through the process. And then also remember, like if you own an agency, that your success is not just on the marketing organization that you're working with, it's on the sales organization as well, right? Especially if they're trying to convert those leads into pipeline and revenue. And so we always made sure that when we would deliver training, for example, on our content, that our agencies were involved in that globally. Our salespeople were involved in that, as well as our marketing people and our partners as well. And so a great example of this is if you go back to the content that I mentioned, the privileged password risk assessment, we would teach everyone how to follow up in a consultative manner. So for example, sales or partners would say, gee, what grade did you get? Where did you do well? Where didn't you do well? Would you be interested in learning how we can help you to improve? And just simply training like that changed the dynamic of the relationship where, yes, we had young, pushy sales reps, no doubt about it, but we trained them to be super consultative, and that's how they were viewed, and it changed the dynamic of the relationship from the get-go, right? And it enabled us to convert leads into pipeline at a very rapid rate, and then pipeline into deals in a quick rate as well. And so it's also about making sure that when you're conducting the training, you view your extended team just as closely as you view your own company, and that that you really think about how all of what you're doing is going to be leveraged. Who are the internal stakeholders that are your customers, and how do you prepare them for success?
Yeah. One thing that, strikes my mind when you say that you kind of helped your sales agents become more consultancy based sales than just, hard lines, more straightforward sales. Is there must be a fine line there too, because I know that if sales gets too far into consultancy, then it becomes, like a almost like a friendship, or almost like a free or helping you session versus, the values on the other side of joining us, right? So did you ever find some fine line where it's like, okay, we want to come at it from a more consultancy side of sales, but we also want to make sure that they know that like the actual help, the real strategy isn't in this call, it's, in partnering with the company afterward?
Yeah, well, what I found, it comes back to knowing your customer and what they expect. So in our case, the IT admins, the techies, these people were far more comfortable with having a couple-liter bottle of Mountain Dew in their basement and, blasting away on their computer with the music on it at night, and they would do a great job for their companies, right? So yeah. Think of it. Those people, although they held a lot of the decision-making ability for the technologies that we sold, like the last thing they wanted to do was to feel like they're dealing with, quote unquote, almost like a used car sales rep, right? There would be nothing you could do to turn off that buyer more, which is why the more consultative, trying to help them in their roles to overcome the urgent problems and challenges that they had, and to do it in a way that that would not cause them to put up sort of like the I'm being pushed into making the decision, feeling pressure, right? That sort of thing. And then a funny thing happens is that if you build that relationship in the right way, people know your title as a sales rep. They get it, right? They know that you're ultimately trying to sell them something. And so long as it creates value for them, they're willing to, and they like you, right? Then they're more willing to spend money. So again, I think it comes down with understanding who your buyer is, and then ultimately constructing the best strategy for follow-up.
Totally agree. You did mention that, you have these different phases of consideration after that first initial touch point, and you said that having the right content during each of those is really crucial to keeping the momentum of your marketing strategy. How do you ensure that that content is delivered to those person in those different phases and on the right platforms, right? Like a lot of people, when you say this, they're going to think immediately like email drip campaign, right? So, but what if you have somebody that has 1,000 unread messages in their email? They're not going to see those emails anyway. And so your content didn't land, right? You can also hit them with ads, but that's assuming that they're going to see that ad and that they're going to be on that platform at the right time and everything. So how do you essentially get that right content to the buyer in the right order of their buying process, like you mentioned?
Right. So, first of all, I made sure that I was merchandising content at all phases across the various platforms or places that I would advertise. And certainly you would calculate and measure and monitor the return on investment for the various places that you're spending money. But one of the overarching ways that I knew that my content was successful was looking at two metrics. First is, was I growing traffic to my website month in and month out, right? And we, in the case of the example that we're using today for Thycotic, we were growing our traffic every single month. The second metric that I looked at was, did I have at least a 5% website visitor to lead capture rate? And I knew that if I maintained or built on a 5% visitor website to lead capture rate, that my content was so good and it was in the right places that I was setting up our business for success. So certainly there are different ways that you would measure different advertising, for example, that you're doing, but those two metrics would be ones that I would always keep my eye on, literally on a daily basis.
That's really good advice. I mean, every agency obviously has to, if you're going to be a digital agency, you need to have a website, of course. I think you should also have a funnel as well that's just designed to convert people into leads and to really complement the website, which is kind of like your online real estate. Marketing agencies often start their client relationships with a free audit of their client's existing marketing strategy to uncover areas to improve on. If you were auditing an online business's marketing strategy, what are the first areas that you're going to look at, regardless of industry? Because the listeners of my show, they serve, all different types of industries with their agencies. But if you're looking at a brand new, you just got a new online business in front of you and they want to know if their online marketing is good or not, where are you going to look first?
Well, I mean, I'll look right at the return on investment. So, for me, I can get into all sorts of details, but I want to know really, one, are they hitting their company's numbers? Two, who is sourcing ultimately the leads and the pipeline and the revenue? Is it sales? Is it partners? Is it marketing? Right? And so where is that being sourced from? What are the conversion rates across the funnel, and then the velocity associated with that? So for example, what is the lead to opportunity conversion rate, and how long does it take a lead to convert into an opportunity on average? And when I sort of can understand what area of the business is sourcing the revenue, whether or not the company is hitting its numbers, how they feel about the return on their marketing investments, and then the conversion rates across the various stages of the funnel and the velocity associated with that, that starts to paint a picture for me about what's going on. And particularly with an experienced eye, then you could start asking far more targeted questions to get to the bottom of where the biggest pains and the biggest opportunities are.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think a lot of people would have said, oh, I'm going to look, first at their ads and their conversion rate. I'm going to look at, the the assets that they have and that kind of stuff. But you made it a little bit simpler than that, which is, are they getting an ROI on their marketing? That was just
right.
a great,
I mean,
it's a great first step.
Like you need to understand what true north is and where they stand. And once you have that bigger picture and that context, then, at least in my view, now you could start looking through the various layers of the onion to figure out what's going on and how you might be of help.
I totally agree. So then let's talk a little bit about one of the layers of the onion. Most digital marketing agencies are, of course, discovered online. So what are your best recommendations for turning a website into a lead magnet or something that's going to just attract the agency more business?
Yeah, so that is something that I always focused on and get on it fast. So let me give you, your listeners, a few ideas of how they can help their clients turn their website into a lead magnet. And by lead magnet, what I mean is at least a 5% website visitor to lead conversion rate. So here are some things you could do. So one, put a get a quote button at the top right of the homepage. Whenever I make that recommendation, as simple as it is, like there is a CEO of a company that's growing like a weed. They'll grow this year to 100 million. That every time I meet with him, he thanks me about that get a quote button, how it's the highest converting thing that they have on their whole website. Second thing, wow. Minimize friction in your forms. Think Google's homepage, how blindingly simple it is. And if you sometimes reduce the number of fields, say from 4 down to 2 that you require, you oftentimes could get a 50% increase in the forms being filled out, which are leads. Offer exclusive or upgraded content. So for example, we offered a piece of content. It was called PAM, Privilege Access Management for Dummies. It was a book that we would do with Wiley, the For Dummies book. And then we would pop up, if someone wasn't responding, an expert's guide, which maybe they felt that their knowledge was more of an expert or that they wanted to get that next level. So offer that upgraded content. A couple of more. Add more validation and proof, right? Think quotes, awards, reviews. Remember, social proof is the new word of mouth. And I guess maybe the last thing I'll offer up is that a lot of organizations, that they will focus on their website as it relates to how it looks on their laptop. But many people are accessing websites on their phone, and a lot of organizations are not looking at the web experience on the mobile. And is it responsive? Does it shrink from left to right? Is it fast, right? And so often I see that the mobile experience is really not very good, and that just kills conversion rate. So those are a few things that I'd recommend. There are many more I suggest in my book, but just a few things that people could easily start to do to turn their website into a lead magnet.
I love it. It can kind of, that's all really, really great and very tactical advice. I think it all boils down to just making it more user-friendly, mobile-friendly, and easy, just generally to use. I can think of, an actual example recently in my life where this specific thing occurred with a local small business. And I was looking for an AC company to come in and look at one of our ACs because it broke, right? And me, as a millennial, I want an easy, simple online experience. And so I'm Googling and I'm picking some of them on the front, the front page. And shockingly enough, some of them, they want me to call They want me to call them. There's their number right on their website. They want me to call them and talk to them about my problem and schedule it on the. I don't want to call them. I want to submit in a form online what happened with my AC, what the symptoms are, and then I want a booking form where I can choose when your technician is going to come out. If there's a fee, I want to pay it online right there for them to come out, and I want to get a schedule. I want to get it booked into my calendar. I want to email and text reminder when my tech is on the way, and that's what I want, right? And so it took a few hops, but I found it. And there's the company, and they're killing it online. They're very mobile friendly. I didn't have to speak to anybody. The tech showed up, and it was a great experience. And I skipped over others that didn't have pieces of that chain systemized, right? And so as my generation and generation behind me gets up, we're going to be looking for that.
100%. And, you even think about like restaurants some of the restaurants that had great online presence through the whole COVID thing, right? Their businesses continue to do well. And today, because of that, a lot of those restaurants, they're not limited by the tables that they have now great drive-up businesses and a great business in their restaurant, right? And so, but if you had a suboptimal experience opposite to what you just described, then your restaurant would have never been like the one I just described.
Right. And if you're not fully, utilizing online and mobile technology, then you're losing customers like me and the generation behind me who will stand for nothing less. We'll go to the next guy who already has it set up.
Or an old guy like me that wants to be dealt with in the same way that you do.
Exactly. 100%. So everyone needs to listen to the answer to this one, because we all, as digital marketing agencies, need to look ourselves in the mirror sometimes and hear from someone on the brand side for what they're looking for. So as a CMO on the brand side, what did you look for specifically when you were hiring a digital marketing agency?
So I look for evidence of A+ smart talent first, right? That was going to be on my account, right? Because what I wanted in an agency, if I had unlimited budget to hire and find just A+ players, right? I'd do that, right? So partly in an agency, I'm looking for really smart A+ talent that I feel can add to our business. Secondly, I look for an organization that really seeks to learn and understand our business and can come in literally not only asking the right questions, but because they do a little bit of homework, could come in with perhaps a couple of ideas, like even early on, right? And then I look for as well, just as partly me, is that I look for organizations that are super into the metrics, right? They're not fluffy and just too much about like sort of the squishy side of marketing, but folks who talk the numbers, who love the numbers, who get into the trends, who can spot problems and help me and are all over it, right? And so when I see organizations like that, and I will tell you that unfortunately they're few and far between, right? Or they're unable to convince that they have all those qualities quickly, right? Those are the things that I look for. And when I find them, I'm loyal as loyal can be, right? Because these are people and organizations that are helping me to deliver, and I certainly like to pay it forward and help their businesses beyond just providing them work, but references or other business opportunities as well.
So you're looking for, sharp experience and no BS, right down to the numbers, and making sure that there are benchmarks and KPIs and that there are, clear objectives along the way. Where I think it's good to point that out too, because, as marketers, a lot of us do get kind of caught up in the rosy, flowery side of marketing, right? Which, and a lot of people I still think to this day do. I mean, I've talked to so many different clients and on the brand side where they're, it was a bigger problem, 10 years ago, but it still exists quite a bit today where they're focused on the wrong things. Like they want all the likes, they want all the shares, they want all the engagement. But at the end of the day, like that's not equal to revenue, right? And so it's defining, like you said earlier, what is that true north and aligning with that, with the client and making sure that that you guys are both, 100% in agreement with what the strategy is. So let's then talk a little bit about high velocity digital marketing. So you recently wrote a new book called High Velocity Digital Marketing. Can you tell our listeners a little more about the lessons in your book and why you wrote it?
Yeah, so I had read a McKinsey survey that said that 83% of CEOs expect their marketing to drive most of their company's growth, yet they're not satisfied with their marketing results and return on marketing investment. And that causes a lot of sales and marketing leaders to feel overwhelmed by revenue expectations they can't meet. And so fundamentally, the way people buy has totally changed. And buyers now rely on digital content to make purchase decisions. There was a study done by Gartner that said that B2B buyers are spending only 17% of the buyer's journey in meetings with sales reps. And that makes sense, right? I mean, think about it. If you're going to go buy a car, the last thing you're going to do probably is go to like 10 different car dealerships to meet with 10 different sales reps, right? You're going to get Google, You're going to look at the car online. You might go to the manufacturer's site, build it. You'll look at competing cars. You'll find out how much that car actually should cost you. You'll probably know more about that car than the sales rep does, right? And that's how people are buying today, right? And so a lot of organizations' marketing, unfortunately, doesn't reflect that reality about being great online. And that's why I wrote High Velocity Digital Marketing, because of the businesses that I've worked for have built quite a reputation for being great online. And I wanted to document what was that blueprint in very much a how-to oriented book so people could get it, read it, and actually do stuff that hopefully is smarter or better literally the moment after they read it.
I love it. I love it. Can you still hear me? I think my mic went off.
Yes.
We're back. We're good. All right, good. No, I completely agree. It also, what you just said about that, the buying experience has totally changed. My partner was just on the market for a new car, and the buying market for cars has really changed. I mean, the landscape for car sales is completely flipped on its head now. And just like you said, he researched that car. He knew everything about that car, what that car costs, where, and the different ranges and everything. And he knew exactly what he wanted. And he wanted to go with this company called Roto, which is kind of like a Carvana, but they deliver the car. There's no BS. You sign it right there on your kitchen counter. They take your old car away, and it's just this beautiful experience. And like those disruptors in the space are so attractive because that old model of going in, like you said, to the car dealer and just dealing with that high pressure sales in your face and everything and feeling that it's just not attractive anymore. He ended up getting the car from the dealer because in the final hour, the dealer called him and said, what can we do to earn your business? And he told him, he said, look, I don't want to go into the Lexus dealership. I don't want to talk to your guys. I'm talking to Roto. We can get the exact same thing for an even better price than what you guys want. And I don't have to come and sit down. And so they counter offered him a better price and to deliver it, which they don't even do. And they won out. But at the end of the day, like, it just goes to show you, like, he knew what he wanted and the way that he wanted to get it. And, you're going to go with a company that does that. And the dealers out there, like the car dealers and the brands out there that don't catch up to what the market wants and what they're getting offered maybe by one of your competitors are going to lose that business. They got his business by calling in the last hour, but they almost lost his business completely because they just don't like to do it that way. They're stuck in the past.
Yeah, 100%. And in that example, that dealership was lucky, right? I mean, very lucky. They were just lucky, and that sort of 11th hour sort of strategy to growing revenue isn't scalable or sustainable, right?
No,
And so
no, no.
and probably they didn't learn their lesson about how to make their buying experience more, with less friction. And to me, a lot of this is all about the concept of velocity, which is what people want, where time is money, and the single metric that reveals the most about time and money is velocity. And velocity is commonly overlooked, and it's rarely managed. And imagine if that car dealership started doing some of the concepts that you're referring to, they would be bringing in money much quicker with far less friction over a given time period. And but I'm sure they probably didn't take that wonderful learning opportunity the way they could have, and maybe made some updates to experiment with their model.
I think their thinking and many dealers thinking is we want them in person because that's how we can high pressure sales them, and that's how we've done this for so long, right? We want them here. But if no one wants to be sold, it's a theme we've had throughout this whole episode. No one wants to be sold to, right? They want a more consultancy style sales experience. So if you remove the BS, you say this is the price, this is as absolutely low as we can go, and if you like it, if you want the car, then we'll come to you. We'll take the car, the old car back. We'll do the trade-in right there and sign. If Carvana and Roto and these other companies can do it, the dealers can do it even better, because that's just removing the middleman and doing it for them, right? And they can probably offer better prices than those other third-party competitors because they're the dealer themselves, right? So it's just catching up to what the market actually wants and expects from the buying experience. With a possible recession ahead of us, how do you think marketing strategies should change if we do end up in an economic downturn?
Well, I think that it really becomes about a return on your marketing investments. And what I've found is that typically what will get cut first will be some of the things like going to events, going to shows, things of that nature. And so what I've found in working with companies is that they're all looking for the silver bullet, that if they just do this one thing, everything's going to get so much better, right? And what I found is there is no silver bullet, that it really oftentimes comes down to the fundamentals. I mean, it's almost like sports in a way. There's a reason why the fundamentals are focused in on over and over. And from a digital marketing perspective, what has led to certainly to my success and through different downturns in the economy is being great at the fundamentals. Right. So knowing who that ideal target buyer is, understanding the full context of their world, creating great content across the buyer's journey, merchandising that content effectively where they hang out online, tracking the metrics like a hawk, such that you're able to change on a dime when you need to. These are a few of the things that really enable businesses to achieve great results no matter what the economy. And so my advice would be focus on the fundamentals through thick and through thin. They will carry you across all types of an evolving economy.
I totally agree. And I kind of want to echo that non-fear sentiment as well, because I feel like too many people get caught up in the thought of a possible economic downturn or the thought of a possible recession and everything. And then they start damaging themselves by acting on those fears and worries when they're not even currently affecting their market and what's going on right now. So I put that question in there because I'm curious to hear how people are thinking and reacting to that fear in the market. But I've seen time and time again businesses do very well in times of downturns because. But yes, COVID being the big one. I've seen many agencies do just fine during COVID because while some people are running for the hills, other people are doubling down and making sure that they get through it. And so there's just, there's a way through all of it. And I think that, like you said, if you focus on the fundamentals, that, you're going to get through it, and you're going to get through it.
Yeah, and I would say
strong.
even from a Google perspective, there's things you could do, like say there's a downturn and you're going to spend a little bit less. But like for us, we understood the coveted keywords that our target buyers were searching for on Google. And what we would do whenever we were creating content is we had our SEO expert sit down with our content creator or creators and review the keywords that ought to go in that content before it was started. They would review it again on the back end. Then we would make sure that the content was properly exposed to Google. And simply by implementing that strategy, it enabled us to punch far above our weight and ultimately just become great from a natural search perspective. And so those are things you could do with like next to no additional budget. That it takes time, but you'll get great results.
I love it. Steve, my last question is something that I ask as a last question to every guest on my show. What would be your number one piece of advice for someone who is just starting their agency or their online business today?
Yeah, so I certainly talk about being able to communicate the value of your differentiation, right? And I think that that is super important. But I would also say this is that working in an agency, there's no substitute for hard work, right? Rolling up your sleeves and getting your hands dirty on your client's business, maybe even more so than some of what your client's employees are, because no great achievements are possible or sustained without that kind of hard work. And it's the price you'll pay for the success that you'll ultimately achieve.
I love it. I love it. There is no substitution for hard work, something that we often can forget this day and age. Steve, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. There are countless nuggets in here for people to action in their agency and for their agency's clients. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Tyler, thanks for having me.